Welcome to a quick discussion of Spider-Man Web of Shadows Amazing Allies Edition. Last year, for April 1st, I decided to take a look at one of the most infamous handheld versions of a console game. So this year, I decided to make this a tradition and take it a step further by playing a handheld game that isn't even the same game remotely as its console counterpart. Basically, this is Spider-Man Web of Shadows in name only, but that actually makes it really interesting.
Another evening in paradise. Who am I kidding?
Spider-Man Web of Shadows released at a really awkward time near the start of the 7th gen of consoles. So, the PS2 was like the best-selling console of all time. The Wii was selling incredibly well, but the PS3 and 360 weren't doing as well for a variety of reasons. For example, the PS3 was like $600 at launch, so a lot of people didn't really want to rush in and buy a PS3, and then the 360 was having trouble with the red ring of death and overall high failure rate for consoles. So a lot of games were still being released for the PS2, and a lot of games are being released for the Wii because those were like the biggest markets at that point. A lot of games would not run on the older consoles or the Wii, so separate versions would be made to basically accommodate the weaker hardware. Spider-Man Web of Shadows Amazing Allies Edition is a very interesting example of this because the Wii version is not the same as this version. This is actually the PSP version of the game, believe it or not. And the Wii version is actually really close to the PS3, 360, and PC versions. Remarkably so, actually, other than having forced motion controls, as many Wii games around this time did. So that means, yeah, the PS2 and PSP versions are the same, and are basically 2D side-scroller beat-em-ups. They're actually not even bad. When I first played the game, I remember really disliking it, partly because of false advertising. To be honest, there was basically no marketing for the PS2 and PSP versions. So you basically buy the game, and you see all the marketing showing this big open world game where you have to choose to side with good or evil, and then you end up getting a 2D side-scroller. And a fairly, like, bare-bones 2D side-scroller at that. But again, I don't even think this is a bad game anymore. I played it again to get ready for this video, and I was actually sort of pleasantly surprised. I still don't like this game, to be honest. I'm not even a big fan of the HD and Wii version, to be honest. Just because it feels a lot more padded than other open-world Spider-Man games of this era, like Spider-Man 2 and Ultimate Spider-Man. But I actually do think this is a solid game that isn't anything special. One interesting thing that this game tries to draw from its console counterpart is choice making. So occasionally you'll have dialogue options, the text will be highlighted in different colors to indicate whether it's a good or bad choice. And to be honest, this really doesn't change much about the game. One thing I remembered being mad about, and I double-checked this by finishing the game again to get ready for this video, this game doesn't really have an ending. One of my favorite details about this game is when you finish the game, when you defeat the final boss, there's like nothing. You basically get a text box that says, "You saved Manhattan," or if you pick the evil route, it says something like, "You enslaved Manhattan," or something like that. That's literally like the majority of the differences between the good and bad routes. And I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, there aren't even credits or anything. The game just kind of abruptly ends. So yeah, this game is not entirely the most polished or high-budget game of all time, but as just a very basic beat 'em up, it's actually not too bad. I almost feel like it's more forgivable on PSP than PS2, in theory, but that's actually not the case. In general, I think it's not a particularly uncommon opinion to say that the actual best version of this game is the DS version, because the DS version is another entirely separate version. It still has choice making, it still has the symbiote and things like that, but it's more of a Metroidvania style 2D beat 'em up, as a result is actually a lot more interesting. It's also a really difficult game too. I remember struggling a lot with it. That studio would also go on, if I'm not mistaken, to make handheld versions for a lot of Spider-Man games that were released around this time. Like they worked on DS versions of Shattered Dimensions and Edge of Time, if I'm remembering right. And I'm pretty sure those games are also pretty well liked, as like more Metroidvania style games. But one issue I have with the choice making is a lot of times it's very shallow. Like you just randomly run into an NPC who just kind of makes small talk, and you can either be nice to them or mean to them, and that's like the majority of the choices in this game. Also, another issue with Spider-Man Web of Shadows Amazing Allies Edition is the name Amazing Allies Edition. So in the top right, you might notice a bunch of icons that we can cycle through of different Marvel characters. These are the Amazing Allies, and they don't entirely live up to the grandiose name that they're given. In the console versions, you'll run into characters like Wolverine, Black Cat, Luke Cage, Moon Knight, and so on. And in a lot of cases, you kind of have to choose who to side with between like the good guys and the bad guys. In this game, there is still some elements of that, but it's a lot more focused on the summon system, which is honestly not great. This should be the first boss battle. This should be a fight with Venom, who should be showing up very soon. By the way, if you finish the game once, you can actually access a New Game Plus mode, which is what I'm playing through here, because I actually feel like this game is kind of difficult at first, partly just because of limited combat options and low health. Playing on New Game Plus is a lot easier. So yeah, in general, I do feel like this game is just very middle of the road. Like, it's such a 5 out of 10 game, to be honest, as a tie-in to a not much better console game. I actually do like Web of Shadows a little bit. It just kind of falls short of other open-world Spider-Man games of this era. But yeah, it is impressive that the Wii version and the HD versions are actually the same, minus motion controls for the Wii version, because all games at this time had to have motion controls. But from what I could tell, they actually seem to work remarkably well for a 2008 Wii game. This was like pre-Motion Plus even, and it seemed relatively responsive from what I tried. Yeah, a lot of times you can kind of get stun-locked, which is also why New Game Plus is a lot more fun in my opinion. And that was the first boss taken care of. This is when we get access to the Symbiote. I remember the PS2 version not looking much better. I think it did look a little bit better than this, but this still isn't great. Another weird thing is there is voice acting in this version, but the majority of the dialogue is presented through these little, like, text choices. So the voice acting is mostly just for, like, quips between Spider-Man and the various other characters, and not substantial dialogue, which is kind of weird. And that should be the end of the first mission. Now we have access to the symbiote, and we can swap between them at any time. We also have this little menu here where we can actually choose the different power-ups we want to equip, and I'll definitely try to make sure to show them off next time, because these are the namesake of this version of the game. I also have all the skills unlocked. I actually tend to forget about a lot of the combat abilities, to be honest, because basic combos are mostly sufficient. So now our mission is to find Shocker. I'm going to skip the tutorials. This is basically telling us how to use the Symbiote by pressing, I think, select in this version. We can swap over. We can do a dash by double tapping the D-pad. And we have, I guess, stronger attacks. I actually don't know for sure. But I'm pretty sure there's no system in place where you end up gaining affinity based on which suit you use more, so you might as well just use whichever suits a situation better, because I'm pretty sure the majority of the affinity for like the ending are based around just like choices you make, like side quests and stuff. I'm pretty sure like the numbers showing up, those basically are like different point values that you can use to upgrade, and the points will also be color-coded, either like neutral, hero, or dark, depending on like specific skills need specific alignment, basically. So yeah, the game is actually kind of interesting, but it's also just really half-baked. Like, this could have been a really fun game if it actually had a little bit more time. Let's actually show this off. Let's summon Wolverine.
Out of my way, bub.
And that was the Amazing Allies edition in a nutshell. So yeah, in the console version, the various allied characters have a lot more significance. Instead of just being essentially like a GIF showing up on screen and then leaving. But they actually do have a lot more characters as a result, but a lot of them are kind of underwhelming. Like, I want to say Galactus isn't great, so we'll summon Galactus shortly. I don't know why Galactus would be working with Spider-Man, though, to be honest. Doesn't entirely make sense. The DS version, I'm pretty sure, has different allies, too. Instead of Wolverine, I think it's Nightcrawler, which I'm actually okay with, because in terms of X-Men characters, I probably would say Nightcrawler is one of my favorite X-Men characters, so yeah, in that regard, I also prefer the DS version. In addition to just being a very solid Metroidvania, it also has a very unique story compared to the other versions. That's actually pretty cool. So yeah, if I were to recommend any version of this game, it probably would be the DS version. The console versions also, I feel like, aren't too terrible. I'm pretty sure they're actually pretty rare, though. I remember looking, and I want to say the PS3 and 360 versions are actually pretty expensive, but the Wii version isn't. So if you can put up with motion controls, I would recommend playing the Wii version of the three major versions. And there is a PS or a PC version, but I'm pretty sure trying to run like an old Windows game on a computer, like on a modern computer, would not exactly be ideal. So it'd probably be better to stick with console versions, but you could probably do things like modding or uncap the frame rate and things like that. So hypothetically, if the PC version could run on like Windows 10 or 11, that probably would be the best way to play, but I just don't know how feasible that would be. So yeah, a lot of times you end up getting these little side quests for affinity or alignment points, basically. I kind of skipped through the text, so I actually didn't see where I have to take this civilian to, unfortunately. I thought that was an invisible wall at first, but I guess not. I think this is actually the way to go. Again, I practiced this game beforehand, and I still kind of forgot everything just because this game is very bland. Kind of lacks personality. Also, I'm pretty sure the DS version has like comic-style cutscenes, which actually look pretty stylish, and obviously a lot of games did things like that for budget or hardware reasons, but a lot of times I actually do like when games really come up with creative solutions that basically are artistically unique to solve a hardware problem, like not being able to have full cutscenes. This is definitely a case where I feel like something more comic-inspired would have been nice, instead of just literally having a lot of like visual novel text boxes popping up with dialogue options. Yeah, in general, this game is still kind of intriguing. I definitely can't exactly recommend this. This is still probably a better game than last year's April 1st special, as this game actually functions, so that's an improvement. But yeah, as far as like 2D action type games go, this one is pretty bland, to be honest. And yeah, the DS version is like comparable because it's still a 2D beat 'em up, but it is just a lot more. It has a lot more personality and better gameplay, I would say. So yeah, that would definitely be the version I would recommend for the non like HD console versions or the Wii version. But yeah, it is honestly really impressive that the Wii version runs on or the Wii version is based on the PS3 360 PC version and is not based on the PS2 version. Yeah, it makes it very unusual, actually. A lot of times when you get games that are like different games entirely, like Sonic Unleashed is a great example, you have a lot of debate over which version is actually the better version, and like for Sonic Unleashed, the Wii version has some pros and some cons, so it is often debated which is the like better version, and the answer is I think a lot of times they both have different pros and cons that kind of even out. Like Force Unleashed is also a good example. It's why I'm actually really happy that the Wii version is getting remastered for Switch soon, just because I feel like it did have several neat additions over the PS3 360 PC versions that are actually fairly available, like through Xbox back compatibility and Steam, if I'm not mistaken. In the case of Spider-Man Web of Shadows, this is definitely a case where if you wanted to play a console version, I would definitely say do not play the PS2 version. It's not even like remotely similar to the point of like being a comparable experience. And yeah, I feel like the game, if it was actually properly advertised as like the PS2 and PSP versions are the same and are like side-scrolling, I would have been like shrug, but I wouldn't have been as mad. But basically playing this game blind and finding out, oh, all the advertisement was for the HD console versions was not a fun surprise. Yeah, if advertised properly, this would still be an incredibly lackluster, bland, like 2D action game, but it just felt so much worse because of the essentially false advertising, considering they never really specified that there would be different versions. But that's about everything I wanted to say about this game. I might keep this tradition a little bit longer because I actually have some more weird handheld versions of console games I would like to show off, and it's kind of a fun topic because a lot of these are entirely separate games, and in other cases, at some point I want to show off some games that are actually good handheld ports of console games. But with that being said, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for another discussion.